Chapter 26. More Pain. A noisy squawk woke Amy. It was now a familiar morning wake-up call. As soon as the early rays of sunshine began to light up the sky, Colors would fly to her windowsill and beg for food. Sometimes he would even swoop in and nibble at her hair. His wake-up calls were very helpful to ensure that Amy got up in time to help with breakfast. Of course, Colors had no concern for breakfast duties. He was simply eager to get his day-old crusts. With her bird on her shoulder, Amy walked out of the house. Zoe, Zilly, and Zeddy were in the front yard nibbling on the grass. She cuddled all of them. "My, you're getting so big," she told Zoe in a hushed tone, not wanting to wake up her housemates. "None of you are babies anymore." Zoe nuzzled her. "Yes, I'll bring you some apple cores tonight," she laughed softly. Fredo came wandering slowly up from the forest, wagging his long fluffy tail. She could see Zahir and Ponce heading down toward the lake with their fishing rods in hand. "Oh, Fredo, you always come to say good morning," she whispered, bending over to give him a hug. Stationed on Amy's shoulder, Colors nipped at Fredo's nose as he came in close contact with the dog. "Hey, stop that!" Amy quietly reprimanded her bird. Patting Fredo's head, Amy noticed all the white hairs in his muzzle. "You're getting old like Uncle Louie," she told him sadly. She kissed his forehead. Fredo didn't follow her down the hill toward the store as he once used to do. Reluctantly, he laid down on the sunny clearing with a deep sigh and watched her depart with his sad brown eyes. Amy felt sorry to leave him, but it was time to get the honey buns out for breakfast and help with their kitchen duties. When she got to the bottom of the hill, movement in a nearby tree caught her eye. Beneatha's lean cat, Mimi, was no longer just a kitten. She had luminous blue eyes and a round brown face. There on the lower branch, the lean cat was happily munching on Flash. Bright red feathers were strewn all over the ground. With a horrified gasp, Amy stopped in her tracks. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Instinctively, she placed her hand protectively on her lorikeet, who squawked noisily, capturing the cat's eager attention. When she could finally form words, Amy exclaimed, "Mimi, how dare you? That was Lily's pet. You can't eat birds. You aren't allowed to hurt anything in paradise. That's a rule. How could you do this?" Colors didn't appreciate the protection of her coddling hand and nipped her finger. "Ouch!" she complained as the lorikeet flew to a nearby tree. Very distraught that a pet bird could become another pet's meal, Amy tried to grab the long, wiry legs dangling from Mimi's mouth. With a growl in her direction and holding firmly to her prey, the cat jumped down from the tree and ran into the forest. Colors squawked. "Stay away from cats," Amy begged her pet. "They are killers. Don't go anywhere close to them. Do you hear me?" Cocking his head from side to side, the lorikeet looked at her silently for a moment or two. Then with a few anxious chirps, she flew away. Feeling very shaken, Amy raced to the store and poured out her grief to Nancy and Milan. Nancy was very sad. "I've been trying to train Ripple," she said as they set out the bread and honey buns, "but whenever she sees a rabbit or a bird, she gets this intense look in her eyes and ignores everything I say. I don't know what to do." Tina, Yuyan, and Beneatha were the first to arrive that morning. They brought a beautiful bouquet of dahlia flowers arranged in one of Beneatha's tall painted pots. As the girls chose their honey buns, Amy relayed the horrific story of Mimi devouring poor Flash. Beneatha and Yuyan burst into tears. "What should I do?" Beneatha mourned, putting her arm around Yuyan. "How can I stop Mimi from killing birds?" "What if Mia starts killing them too?" Yuyan cried. Colors swooped into the kitchen. Milan chased him out. Amy quickly cut a slice of day-old bread and placed it outside the window. With a squawk of appreciation, her bird dug in greedily. Odin and Ponce swaggered into the store yawning. Dirt was in Odin's hair and Ponce's knees were filthy. Both of them were getting stockier by the day. But then others were rounding out as well. A few of the leaner tinies, such as Dia, Tina, Amy, and Milan, had benefited from some extra weight, but for the majority, the growing waistlines were keeping Dia very busy, constantly altering clothes. "There better still be honey buns," Odin demanded. "There are lots," Amy assured him. "You're up early." "I'm not missing breakfast anymore," Odin stated firmly. "Not since there is finally something good to eat." Noticing the tears on the girls' faces, Odin came close to Yu-Yan and asked, "Hey, what's wrong, kitty?" Amy was surprised that Odin could sound compassionate. Yu-Yan put her hands over her face and turned away. "Vanitha's cat ate Lily's bird," Nancy told him matter-of-factly, "and Yu-Yan is worried that her cat might become a killer too." Odin sat down beside Yu-Yan and put his arm around her. "That's okay," he said, doing his best to sound sympathetic. "It's just what kitties do best." He was unsuccessful in suppressing a chuckle. Yu-Yan squirmed. To everyone's great surprise, Odin pulled Yu-Yan close, almost onto his lap. With a sudden burst of strength, little Yu-Yan pulled away and slapped him across the face. "Don't you dare touch me!" she cried out. Then she ran out of the store. "Ouch!" Odin said. "She hit me. I was just trying to be nice. She should be punished for hurting me." Amy looked at Nancy with concern. It was true that outside the store the clay tablet said no one was supposed to hurt anyone else. However, the girls didn't feel Yu-Yan should be blamed for her reaction, neither did Milan. "Can't hug people if they don't want to be hugged," the store assistant spoke up with uncharacteristic boldness. "Who says?" Odin disagreed angrily. "That's not one of the rules. I'll hug who I want." Milan shook his blonde head helplessly. Odin grabbed 5 honey buns. "And what have you brought to trade?" Nancy asked. "I brought 20 pebbles for you yesterday," he shrugged. "That's enough." "That was for the 10 honey buns you took then," Milan argued. "You ask way too much," Odin disagreed, rushing for the door with the honey buns in his arms. "That's stealing," Nancy called out. "It's against the rules." "Punish Yu-Yan for hurting me and I'll give them back," Odin retorted, and then he fled. A few minutes later, Georgia, Lily, and Dia burst into the store with Zahir, Ponzi, and Kenzie. Red juice was all over Zahir's blue t-shirt. "What's going on?" the dark-haired tiny asked with a quizzical expression on his face. "Rotten tomatoes are flying through the air." Everyone ran out to take a look. From the North Forest, red spheres were being launched up high and were falling down near the store. "I threw out a whole bunch of rotten tomatoes last night," Nancy admitted regretfully. Uncle Louis came running over. Before he could ask anything, a tomato hit him on the forehead. Dark brown juice dripped down his nose and onto his chin. "Who is doing this?" he asked, wiping his white beard and looking around to see who was missing. Many voices tried to fill him in on all the morning's events. He heard about cats killing birds and boys hiking girls who didn't want to be hugged and getting slapped in the face and honey buns being stolen. "And Odin says Yu-Yan should be punished for hurting him," Nancy exclaimed. "But she was upset that he was pulling her onto his lap. What else could she do?" "Come with me," Uncle Louis said to everyone. "Let's go talk to Odin." With all the tinies in tow and the 2 dogs following, Uncle Louis led the way to the forest. Ever since he had started having evening sessions with Odin and Ponzi, the resentful attitude seemed to be improving. But now, behind a tree, Odin was adding more rotten tomatoes to his very large catapult. He had used lots of hot glue to construct the strong building board beams, which were 1 hand-width thick. "Odin, what is this about?" Uncle Louis demanded. Odin crossed his arms indignantly. "I tried to comfort Yu-Yan because she was crying and she hit me in the face. I was just trying to be nice. She should be punished." There was indeed a red hand mark on one side of Odin's face. Uncle Louis sighed. It was a tough situation to explain. "Regardless of whether or not Yu-Yan needs to be punished," Uncle Louis told him, "it's not up to you to punish her or anyone else. No more launching tomatoes." "That's not a rule," Odin retorted. "No, not specifically, but what you are doing could hurt people, and it is making a mess." Angrily, Odin replied, "Stop people from hurting me, and I'll stop hurting them." "I want everyone to get ready for school," Uncle Louis demanded, looking at all the tinies. "We need to have a talk this morning. Meet me at the schoolhouse as soon as you can." Amy walked to school with Nancy and Milan. Rusty and Bojo followed happily along, occasionally stopping to sniff at rabbit holes and tufts of grass. Georgia was in front, chatting with Zahir and Kenzie. Holding hands, Lily and Ponzi came running past everyone. Damien arrived at the schoolhouse straight from the beach, having missed out on breakfast that morning. He had a very handsome haircut, and everyone was commenting on it. "Vanitha is the best," Damien bragged, putting his arm around her. "She sure knows how to cut hair, and what an amazing surfer she's becoming. She'll be the shining star in our next show." Vanessa looked up at him radiantly, and Amy felt jealous again. Even though she was convinced Damien wasn't a good choice for her, he still had a pull on her heart. Santa and Charlie were already sitting in the long benches around the schoolhouse laughing about something. Bojo was resting his head on Charlie's lap. Tina had plucked up the courage to sit near Vahid, and they were now waiting for school to start in an awkward silence. France sat down on the other side of Dia and tried to start up a conversation. "Everyone is finding a special friend except me," Amy thought to herself sorrowfully, sitting down on the lowest stair beside the kitchen crew. It wasn't quite everyone, but it sure felt like it. "I used to be so happy," she reflected, "but now I just feel sad." Someone nudged her arm, and she looked over to receive a big lick on the face from Fredo. "You came down from the hill," she whispered happily. Putting her arm around the gentle golden dog, she drew him close. Fredo lay down with a happy sigh and rolled over on his back so that she could scratch his tummy. With a soft laugh, she obliged. "Guys and girls," Uncle Louis began his address, "you are all becoming adults. You are no longer children. It is quite natural that you are pairing off and feeling special bonds develop. It is normal to want to give hugs and hold hands. But," he paused, making sure he had everyone's attention, "sometimes a girl may feel something for a guy who doesn't feel the same for her, or a young man may feel he loves a young lady but she doesn't love him back. If this happens," Uncle Louis told them, "then hugs won't be appreciated. We all need our personal space. We all get to decide who can be in that close space." With a sympathetic glance in Odin's direction, he clarified, "But it is much kinder if we let someone know politely that they are invading our space rather than hit them. We could say, 'Please don't touch me, please give me more space.' And if someone asks us to back off, we must all respect their request. So you should only hug someone if they want a hug from you. Otherwise, even though you may intend to be kind, invading someone's personal space without their permission may cause them to feel that you are hurting them." There were some looks of consternation between the tinies. Some nodded, some seemed confused. "We all have to appreciate one another's feelings," Uncle Louis explained. "We only touch each other if that touch is wanted and enjoyed. Otherwise, unwanted touch is included in the rules of no hurting." Odin was shaking his head like he didn't agree in any way. But on the other side of the schoolhouse steps, Yu-Yan was nodding fervently. "I like that," Amy thought to herself. Suddenly she had an idea, and she thought it was a really good idea. Only she didn't want to share it out loud. With a smile, she told herself, "I think it will be helpful to make a few additions to the tablet. Then the rules will be clear to all of us." Chapter 27. Adding to the Rules. Early the next morning, with colors on her shoulder and Fredo tagging along until she reached the clearing, Amy absent-mindedly made her way to the store. She set out the honey buns while still deep in thought. All three workers were quiet as Milan cut up the fruit and Nancy baked the bread. While she fried the scrambled eggs, Amy kept thinking about the rules on the clay tablet. When she had finished the eggs, she purchased a board and a marker from Nancy, trading an unused surfing lesson coupon and 3 pretty blue pebbles that Kenzie had mined from the hill. Outside on the deck, Rusty watched her curiously as she laid the new board down. "If I write the examples out clearly," she thought to herself, "then there can be no doubt what each rule means." She smiled. "I'm sure the professor will appreciate having his rules explained to everyone. It will help us to keep them." She looked at Vanitha's beautiful writing on the stone tablet and tried to copy her style. Printing as neatly as she could, Amy wrote, "No hurting anyone means no unwanted touching, no throwing things that might hurt someone, no saying hurtful things or name-calling, and please stop your pets from hurting others. No stealing means trade fairly. Don't take things without permission or trade." When she was done, Amy put her board next to the clay tablet and looked at her work with approval. It wasn't decorated like Georgia and Vanitha's tablet, but she had accurately copied Vanitha's lovely writing style, and it was very easy to read. As the other tinies came into the store for honey buns and scrambled eggs, Everyone was talking about the new sign. "That's a lot more rules," Zahir said as he came through the door, hand in hand with Georgia. They had 12 fresh fish fillets to trade for breakfast. "Did Uncle Louis write those?" "It doesn't look like Uncle Louis's writing," Kenzie replied, handing over a straw basket which he had made for 2 days' worth of food. Milan admired the basket as Kenzie took 4 honey buns and a scoop of scrambled eggs. "I'd say Vinitha wrote it," he said. "It's her beautiful style." Amy kept quiet as she dipped the fish fillets in flour and placed them in hot oil. Nancy looked over at her quizzically and then ran outside to see what everyone was talking about. "I like those new rules," Yu Yan exclaimed when she arrived. "Me too," Tina agreed. Then she held up the flowers they had just picked from the garden. "Look at these roses," she said to Milan. "They just began blooming this morning. I love the deep red." Milan took the roses from Tina and Yu Yan, and Amy came over quickly to admire all the colors. "The red is lovely," she said with delight, "and the pink is so soft and beautiful." Lima came in with a handful of sparkling beads from Mining Hill. "Why do we need all those rules written out?" he asked, handing his tray to Milan and picking up 5 honey buns. "'Cause then we won't be confused," Yulan replied, although she frowned. "I really don't know how to control my cat." "You could keep her inside your house," Amy suggested as she served Yu Yan a scoop of the scrambled eggs. "I think all cats should be kept indoors." Everyone looked at her in surprise. Coming back into the store, Nancy had overheard the dialogue and seen the sign. She looked over at Amy with a quizzical expression, knowing exactly who had traded for the board that morning. "But cats would be miserable inside," she argued, striding across the kitchen. "We can't keep cats in all day and night." "Well, how do you think we feel when our precious pets are killed?" Lily spoke up. "We feel miserable." Entering the kitchen where Amy was frying the fish, Nancy remarked quietly, "Why did you copy Vinitha's writing? It looks just like she wrote it." Amy replied softly, "I just wanted it to be pretty, like hers." Nancy shook her head in amazement as Amy took the golden fish fillets out of the pan and put them on a plate. She brought them to the store counter. Odin and Ponzi entered after placing 6 dirty rocks outside the store. "Throwing things doesn't always hurt people," Odin sneered. "Are you saying that we can't even throw apples to each other anymore? How restrictive is this place going to get?" Damien walked in with the newly expanded rule board in his hands. "Who wrote this?" he asked gruffly. Everyone looked around at everyone else. For a minute, no one spoke. Then Amy quietly admitted, "I did." Astonished, Damien looked at her with dismay. Most of the others looked up in surprise. Amy wished she could hide. "You shouldn't have done this," he said, frowning. "The 2 rules in clay cover all of this. We don't need to start listing out the details." Swallowing hard, Amy tried to keep from crying. While the other negative comments had bothered her a little, Damien's disappointment was crushing. Uncle Louis walked in and Damien showed him the board. "But it helps to have the rules spelled out," Zahir said, taking some of the fried fish and passing a couple to Kenzie. "Then we all understand what no hurting really means." He smiled at Amy. "I think it's good." "Me too," Kenzie agreed. Zahir cut a lemon in half and they both squeezed the juice on their fish. Kenzie, Zahir, Fahid, Yu Yan, Santa, and Tina were all on Amy's side. Nancy, Milan, Vinitha, and Georgia kept silent. The others vocally disagreed. Amy had never witnessed such a big argument involving so many of the tinies. It became crowded in the store because everyone was too caught up in the argument to go sit out on the deck. At last, Damien put his hand up and told everyone to be quiet. "This is why we shouldn't add to the rules," he exclaimed. "It will only lead to lots of arguing. We need to keep things simple." "Let me talk this over with the professor," Uncle Louis said, having listened quietly to the heated discussion. He reached for the last 3 honey buns to put on his plate. The fish and scrambled eggs were all gone. "It's up to him whether he wants us to elaborate or leave the rules as they are. For now, Amy's board can stay by the tablet." "Do we have to keep our cats inside all day?" Vinitha asked. With a puzzled expression, Uncle Louis turned to Amy. "Why do they have to keep the cats inside?" Amy explained how the cats were killing pets. "But they would make a mess on the floor," Nancy objected. Most of us have pet chambers, Lily reminded her. I don't, Nancy protested. I'll talk to the professor about the cats, Uncle Louis assured them. For now, enough has been said. Finish your breakfast and let's get to school. That night, however, when Uncle Louis entered the control cave, he tried to find some solutions online. He spoke into the phone, "How do you stop cats from killing birds?" The words came up instantly on the screen, and several good suggestions popped up underneath. Most of the hits seemed to agree that cats should be kept inside at night. However, several sites suggested that during the day, a bright collar with a bell would alert birds and other small prey that the cat was nearby. Choosing a video call, Louis unfortunately woke up the professor. After making an apology for the late hour, he explained the dilemma. Rabbits and birds are being killed by the cats, and this is really upsetting the bird owners. Sitting up in bed, the professor yawned and nodded. Right, I can see that would be upsetting. I looked for solutions online, Louis told him. One suggestion is to put a bright collar on the cat's neck with a little bell to warn everything that the cat is nearby. I'll encourage the girls to make these collars if you could send in some small bells to attach. Excellent suggestion, the professor nodded, wiping his weary eyes. I'll send in some as soon as possible. Louis thanked him and then remembered to ask, also, did you notice the board by the store with the expanded rules? No, I did not, the professor frowned. What was added? Listing out the additional rules, Louis asked the professor if he thought these were helpful or whether he should get rid of the new board. Lors, whoever is adding to my rules, the professor retorted in surprise. Why would anyone want more rules? It's not really adding, Louis protested. It's more like explaining or clarifying. For those of us who like things to be orderly and fair, rules help to determine the boundaries. Whether it's clarifying or explaining, the professor retorted, who did it? Amy, Louis replied. Shaking his head in surprise, the professor hardly knew what to say. Finally, he exclaimed, I'm astonished. I would never have guessed Amy would do such a thing. Why not? Louis disagreed. She cares deeply about right and wrong. What is with Amy, anyway? The professor implored anxiously. Every time I see her, she looks so sad. I haven't heard her sing once since she returned to paradise. She isn't hanging out with Zahir or Georgia, and not even with Damien. Well, she's very upset when rabbits and birds die, Louis informed him, which has happened a few times lately. Also, she hasn't been go-karting or surfing since her accidents, and therefore she's missing out on the fun social activities. And as you've probably noticed, there's been a lot of pairing off between the guys and girls, which has upset old friendships and changed the dynamics. Have you had a personal evening session with Amy? No, Louis replied. I've spoken to about half of the teens, but not yet to Amy. I think you should talk to her next, the professor suggested. Remind her what a beautiful world she lives in. Give her a big hug. Encourage her to renew her old friendships and be more involved. Good idea, Louis nodded. I will have an evening session with Amy. And should I get rid of the board? Yes, you must, the professor said firmly. 2 rules are more than sufficient, and no clarification is needed. Remembering another matter that he wanted to discuss, the professor added, and by the way, Louis, I'd like you to organize a solar cooking experiment. I think it will help if the kids have another project to exercise their creative minds and keep them busy. They are interested in making flying machines, Louis suggested. That's complicated, the professor mused, and very dangerous. Maybe we should wait until they're a little older. I was thinking that it would be fun for them to be able to cook food on their own outside. They can harness solar energy. I'll send you in the instructions. Louis nodded. That does sound fun. Thank you. When Louis left the control cave, he walked toward the outhouses, as he normally did on his way back to his cabin. Ponzi was coming out of the boys' side. You're up late, Uncle Louis commented. And so are you, Ponzi smirked. Were you talking to the professor again? I do every night, Uncle Louis assured him. Communication is vital for all of us. I don't get how you talk to him in there, Ponzi remarked curiously. I told you, Uncle Louis smiled. I have a window. I can see him and he can see me. Ponzi frowned. It's just not a very good place for a window. He paused and then prodded a little more. Why can't you take us in there?
It would be very helpful to see that there actually is a professor and to talk to him ourselves. Why can't you trust me, Ponzi? I do, sort of, he said, but it doesn't fully make sense. Putting his arm around the young man's shoulders, Uncle Louis walked forward with him to the meadow. Let's just say this, Uncle Louis explained. In the cave, there are things that can be used to benefit paradise. Which could also be used to cause a lot of damage. I love paradise and all of you, so I choose only to use those things to benefit others. However, not everyone would make the same choice. What are those things? Ponzi marveled, raising his eyebrows in a comical fashion. They can help or harm? How is that even possible? Thoughtfully, Uncle Louis considered his answer. Do you remember the very sharp saw we used on the sunflower? He asked. Ponzi nodded. Yeah, that was great. I wish we still had it. It was very useful for cutting down the sunflower, Uncle Louis agreed. But if someone was in a destructive frame of mind, that saw could cause a lot of harm. It could cut down a tree in minutes, Ponzi agreed mischievously, and no one would mess with me if I had it in my hand. Exactly, Uncle Louis smiled. You get the point very well. Things that the professor gives us for really good, helpful purposes can also be used in bad, destructive ways. It all depends on the intent of the user. Nodding his head slowly, Ponzi seemed to accept the answer. They had come to Uncle Louis's cabin, so they said good night and parted company. Entering his cabin, Uncle Louis plunged his hand into his pocket and wrapped his fingers around the key. Ooh, I'd better keep this safe, he thought to himself.
Chapter 28. Cat collars and solar ovens. The school activity the next day was making cat collars. While the collars were being made by the young ladies, the young men hunted down the cats. Every kitten that had been brought into paradise was found and collared, much to their dislike. However, no one was able to find Ripple. We'll get her tomorrow, Uncle Louis assured them, and from now on I suggest that all cats be kept inside during the night. It may be hard at first, but they will learn to sleep in the dark and enjoy the outdoors during the day. How do we keep them in? Tina inquired. All the windows in our house are open. Try your pet chambers, Damien suggested. But how do we keep cats in the pet chamber? Vanitha questioned, flashing a beautiful smile in his direction. Damien hesitated for a moment. Then he said, I'll make gates for everyone. Thank you, Damien, Uncle Louis praised. That will be very helpful. Nancy piped up. I don't have a pet chamber, she said. Damien shrugged. Kenzie pondered the problem thoughtfully. I'll make you a box with breathing holes, he promised. Thank you, Nancy smiled. That will be worth 3 days of meals. There was still time before lunch, so Uncle Louis told everyone about the new project they would work on after lessons were over each day. He showed them the supplies that had been sent in to build the solar cookers. On the school deck, he had piled lots of cardboard, blanket material for insulation, small sharp knives, tape, thick aluminum foil, and glass panes with wooden frames. Uncle Louis told them there were 4 different designs, saying, These are the instructions to help you get started, but feel free to experiment and add your own ideas or combine designs if you wish. If you can bake a loaf of Nancy's bread golden brown, you will have designed an excellent oven. Most of the students were enthusiastic about the project. Even Odin and Ponzi were interested in something that involved food. Lily, Dia, and Lima didn't see the point, murmuring that Nancy could bake everything just fine in the kitchen. Uncle Louis wisely separated the murmurers, putting them in with groups that were keen. Amy was put into Kenzie, Vahid, and Tina's group. Looking around, she noticed that Uncle Louis had taken many away from their familiar friends and given them the opportunity to work with those he didn't know so well. As they read the instructions, Amy's team considered their options. I like the parabolic version, Vahid remarked. It looks like a lot of fun to build. It does look more challenging, Kenzie agreed, looking at the instructions. But it says here the box oven gets higher heat. It's too easy, Tina stated. We'll have it done in less than a week. But the box oven can reach the highest temperatures, Amy encouraged her teammates. If we want to bake good bread, then we need the highest heat we can get. We could combine the box oven with some of the angled designs, Tina suggested. Perhaps we can get the heat even higher. Uncle Louis says we have 4 weeks, Kenzie considered thoughtfully. Why don't we build 2 ovens? Amy and I will do the box design, and Vahid and Tina, you can try one of the more complex patterns. We'll experiment. Maybe we'll combine ideas once we've tried them separately. We have plenty of time. Tina was quite happy with the compromise, especially since Vahid would have to talk to her in order to sort out the plans. After lunch that day, another surfing show took place at the pier. Georgia and Kenzie made lots of noise with the shakers to announce the start, while Santa and Lima danced and cheered loudly. Damien surpassed them both with his own rhythmic motions, prancing down the pier to finish with a backward flip off the end. As he rose to the surface of the water, Lima tossed him his board, which the talented surfer caught, spun around, and hoisted himself up in a surfing position. It was a great addition to the show. Xana had been busy teaching her whole group how to dance, and even Vanitha tried some new moves as she twirled along the pier. Dia had created sequined surfing outfits for them all, which glittered and shone in the sunlight. In return, she had free access to every show, and enough meals to last for weeks. Amy heard Lima giving the girls some last-minute advice. So remember, he said, don't catch a whoosh. Wait for a good one. How do you catch a whoosh? Amy wondered curiously. Is a whoosh an actual thing? I thought it was just a mean name. Santa nodded as though she understood the instructions, and Amy determined to ask her about it when she had the chance. Sitting on the pier with most of the other tinies and 3 of the dogs, Amy watched the new performers. She was impressed how much the girls had learned. Secretly, she wished she also was a star in the show. Everyone clapped when Vanitha and Santa managed to stay on their boards for over 10 seconds. Even though he had been doing more teaching than practicing lately, Damien had perfected a new skill. As he surfed, he could flip his board around to go in a different direction. Everyone cheered loudly. It was fun to watch the performance as each wave presented a unique challenge. After the show and before dinner that night, Damien quickly made 2 gates for the pet chambers. Kenzie put together a breathing box. Uncle Louis had told them that they could help themselves to whatever materials they needed, and Nancy was very happy to provide. Those with cats and pet chambers took home their gate. Nancy gratefully accepted the large, comfortable box. But Ripple was still missing. Chapter 29. An Evening with Uncle Louis. Daylight hours had been gradually extending every day. Uncle Louis explained that it was early spring, and the sun was closer and therefore provided light for a longer time. After dinner one evening, Uncle Louis walked into the kitchen, where Amy, Nancy, and Milan were cleaning up from the day's food preparation. "Amy," he said, "when you're done, I'd like to take a walk with you and see if the deer are still friendly. I hear you're looking after all the forest animals." "Oh, that would be nice," Amy replied, looking up with a smile. She had been eagerly waiting for her turn with Uncle Louis. "I can come now," she said happily, picking up one of Vanitha's pots with pink swirls. It was full of pellets and kibble for the birds and Freddo. Walking with Uncle Louis, she closed the door behind her so that Rusty wouldn't follow. Being young, Rusty was still very energetic and disturbed the shyer animals. Taking Uncle Louis to the side of the store, she showed him the collection of food scraps in her carry cart. Plenty more lay beside the cart. "If you stand still and don't make a noise," she whispered to Uncle Louis, "you will see the rabbits that eat here in the evening." Uncle Louis waited patiently, and sure enough, a few rabbits cautiously hopped out from behind the trees to nibble on the apple cores and carrot tops. Suddenly, a bell jingled, and they all fled for their hideouts. Millie pounced on the pile of compost. She was quite dismayed to see that her prey had escaped. "It works!" Amy exulted. "Uncle Louis, the collars work!" "Yes, they do," he laughed, happy to see she was thrilled. "And now you're off to feed the deer?" "Yes, they are always waiting for me this time of night." "You love the animals, don't you?" "I do," she nodded, pushing the carry cart as they walked towards the hill. "They are my friends. They always come running to see me, and that makes me happy." Uncle Louis nodded. I'm glad you're caring for them. It's the best way to keep them tame. Amy agreed, looking up with a smile. The sky was pink and the lake was reflecting the pretty colors. Thankful to be with Uncle Louis, she chatted merrily. She told him about the way her lorikeet woke her up every morning and how Fredo always came for a cuddle. They climbed the well-worn path up Rainbow Hill, through all the tall evergreens and leafy eucalyptus trees. Amy pushed the carry cart while Uncle Louis climbed slowly, huffing and puffing a lot. I just can't do this hill like I used to, he apologized. Maybe it's my expanding waistline, he laughed, patting his protruding stomach. Uncle Louis was becoming rounder, just like several others in paradise. With another laugh, he stopped to catch his breath. Whew, he panted. Perhaps I should walk up this hill every evening. Don't worry, Amy told him. There's no rush. Once they had reached the top of the hill, Uncle Louis plunked himself down on the ground with a big sigh. Amy scattered the birdseed pellets, and colors and skies swooped in for dinner. She whistled for the squirrels, and they came running down the tree trunks, chatting eagerly in anticipation of the tasty treats they might find. Fredo limped slowly over as well, and flopped down happily beside Uncle Louis. With empathy for the aging dog, the elder Tiny ruffled his soft ears. Amy brought over a handful of kibble, but Fredo turned away politely. He didn't seem hungry. The deer in Amy's yard looked up from the grass and eyed the newcomer curiously, but it didn't take them long to shuffle over and nuzzle at her arms. Don't worry, Zoe, Amy said, patting her furry friend's back. I have apple cores for all of you. One by one, she fed the younger deer. Eventually, the older ones came timidly out of hiding. Sometimes these ones come too, she said quietly, but they are very shy. Uncle Louis watched as she held out apple cores to the older deer. The squirrels noisily helped themselves to the scraps in the carry cart. In the distance, happy shouts came from Rose's Hill. Zoe and Zilly tried to steal the treats from their elders, but Amy gently shooed them away. No, give the others a turn, she told them. I brought these for your uncles. When the deer had eaten all the apples, they returned to grazing in the grass. Uncle Louis pointed out the loons, bobbing up and down in the water. In the evening, the lake was always calm. Waves came only after school was over and stopped right before dinner time. It was a very predictable pattern. I love watching the loons take off from the water, he said. Amy sat down beside him. So do I, she agreed enthusiastically. For a while they sat watching the loons, patting Fredo, and discussing cat collars, Luna moss, and the new solar cooking project. They talked about the board with the list of rules, and Uncle Louis kindly explained that the professor had decided the board must go. It's helpful to discuss all the ways we might hurt others, he assured her. However, the professor thinks that once we start adding to the rules, the list will never end. Reluctantly, Amy nodded. It did start a big fight, she admitted. It didn't help like I hoped it would. No, but it did draw attention to the cat problem, and we've now made some good changes. Eventually, Uncle Louis asked, You used to do a lot of singing on this hill, Amy. I don't think I've heard you sing since the flood. No, I haven't, she admitted glumly. Why? Uncle Louis, she began, I feel sad most of the time. I don't feel like singing. What is making you feel sad? Oh, well, a lot of things, she frowned. Can you tell me about them? Swallowing hard, she said, I don't know. You'll feel better if you do, he encouraged. Sometimes I feel sad and it helps me to talk with someone I love. Who do you talk to when you feel sad? The professor. I spend a lot of time talking with him. Oh, Amy said, thinking it over. Well, she sighed, deciding to begin with feelings that she was confident Uncle Louis would understand. I felt sad when the Luna moth and the butterflies died. So did I, really sad. Looking wistfully over at Paradise, she added, and I feel terrible when I see cute little rabbits and beautiful pet birds get eaten. With a big sigh, Amy said, and I feel afraid when I see that Fredo looks like he's getting older and well, so are you. Fredo looked up at the mention of his name and whined sadly. With a wistful smile at the old dog, Uncle Louis patted his furry ears. Yes, that makes me feel really sad too. It would be nice if we never got old and nothing ever died. Why can't it be like that? Amy asked. I'm not sure, Uncle Louis told her. I guess it's just the way it is. I tell myself that we have to enjoy what we can now and be happy for all the things that are good. Nodding slowly, Amy wasn't completely convinced. Light pink streaks were becoming more prominent in the sky above. Golden light edged the higher, puffy orange clouds, contrasting brilliantly with the deep blue that was settling in. It's getting dark, Amy, Uncle Louis told her, but the sky is never so beautiful as it is just before nightfall. We could cry because we're losing the light, or we could enjoy every moment before the sun goes down. Looking out to the lake, he yearned. We can even hope that maybe there is something beyond the darkness, like the dawn of a new day. Amy looked over at Uncle Louis thoughtfully. There was a dreamy look on his face as he stared at the sky. She liked his idea, and it gave her encouragement. With a smile, she mulled it over. Do you have hope? Uncle Louis paused. He was still searching, but everything that he'd investigated on the internet seemed unreliable and contradictory. There had been articles that sounded very promising, but having read the professor's book, he knew that the mastermind of Paradise was absolutely convinced these were just foolish fantasies. I hope to find hope, he shrugged, and then he quickly changed the subject. Amy, you've been through a lot of sad things lately. Losing Rosa, feeling responsible for an accident you didn't mean to cause. Tears welled up in her eyes. Uncle Louis put his arm around her shoulders, and the tears began to flow. Does that still trouble you, Amy? She nodded, and her lip began to tremble. Is that the reason you don't go-kart with the others? Laying her head on his shoulder, a loud sob escaped from Amy's chest. I understand, he assured her. I fully understand. You likely fear that you will injure someone else if you go again. But Amy, do you realize that I also feel guilty for that accident? Looking up with astonishment, Amy had never considered this before. You do? She inquired. Yes. I knew that you were all tired and that you'd only just begun learning how to drive. Remember, I said that you'd all had enough for one day, and then I foolishly allowed everyone to have one more ride and go all the way from the top. I have regrets, too. Even the professor wishes he'd never put that bump on the hill. They talked for a while longer about the accident, and Amy felt better knowing that others shared her feelings of guilt. It wasn't all on her shoulders. In a kind manner, Uncle Louis reminded her how much go-karting had taken place since the accident and that no one else had been hurt. He encouraged her to try the activity again. He explained this would be a helpful way to overcome her anxiety. Little by little, Amy began to consider the possibility of riding in the back of the cart. However, the other things that bothered her were much deeper and difficult to confess. She felt bad about the jealous feeling she had when she saw Georgia and Venitha with Zahir and Damien. Not only were the dark feelings painful, but she also felt badly about feeling such terrible emotions. Uncle Louis was so loving. Could he understand not loving everyone? And Zahir and Damien were no longer her special friends, so how could she complain about losing them? Georgia and Venitha hadn't purposely tried to hurt her, so how could she justify her dislike? Did Uncle Louis even know what it was like to feel jealousy or dislike someone? Would he be shocked and disappointed to know she harbored such feelings? Are you missing some of your friends, Amy? The question caught her off guard. She heaved a sob and hid her face in her hands. Uncle Louis pulled her closer. It's okay, Amy, he told her. I thought you might be feeling a little left out. I'm glad that you and Santa still have a close friendship. She is my best friend, Amy nodded. But she spends most of her time with Charlie or taking surfing lessons. Laughter sounded from the pathway down the hill. Amy recognized Zahir's voice, and so did Fredo. The golden dog jumped up and waltzed over to greet his master. Amy heard Georgia tease, But I went further than you. You did not, Zahir jested. Kenzie and I crossed the tracks. When? I must have been somewhere else. We did, Zahir protested merrily. As they came up the clearing, Amy could dimly see that Georgia was holding onto Zahir's arm. Sorry to interrupt, the dark-haired young man said, stopping in his tracks when he saw Amy and Uncle Louis sitting together. Fredo pressed up against his master's leg, and Zahir ruffled his ears. "Don't be sorry," Uncle Louis replied. "We're just having an evening session." Close together, the young couple walked off toward the girls' mansion. Fredo followed them. Amy stared longingly. When they were out of hearing, Uncle Louis turned to Amy. "I can see that you've lost some friendships you once valued. Are you okay with that? Or is this part of the sadness?" Twisting her hands together nervously, Amy admitted, "Uncle Louis, it's a big part of the sadness. They hardly notice me anymore. I thought I was special to them, but now I just feel, well, forgotten. And I wonder if I ever was special, since they can just go on without me so easily." "That is heartbreaking," Uncle Louis agreed. "I think I'd be feeling some jealousy, perhaps, maybe resentment." Amy nodded. "And then I feel bad about feeling bad," she confessed with anguish. "I don't want to be a terrible person." Uncle Louis rubbed her back. "Amy, you're not a terrible person. You're a real person. Losing close friendships hurts deeply. It's natural to feel upset. Grief, hatred, jealousy, anger, they are all reactions we feel when things like this happen." He gave her a comforting squeeze. "Don't think that you are the only tiny that feels this way," he assured her, "because you're not at all. It's good to talk these emotions through with someone you love and trust. Don't let them build up and weigh you down." After a pause, he asked gently, "Have you told your old friends that you miss them?" Amy shook her head adamantly. "No way, Uncle Louis. How could I do that? They obviously aren't missing me." "Don't be so sure," he responded. "If you were avoiding their company, they might be feeling like you have forgotten them. Sometimes our reactions to each other just get worse and worse if everyone is trying to avoid being hurt. Be the kind person you want to be, regardless of how others treat you." Amy nodded sadly. Uncle Louis stood up and took her hand. He pulled her to her feet. "Listen here, young lady," he said kindly, holding both her hands. "Let me remind you who you are. You are a good leader. You are a special girl who has inspired all of us numerous times to be thankful and happy for our beautiful world. You have a loving heart. You care about right and wrong. Get to know everyone and encourage them whenever you can. Make new friends, but always be kind to the old ones." He smiled and added, "And come talk to me whenever you need someone to listen." "Thanks, Uncle Louis," Amy replied with a happy sigh. "I love you, Amy," he said, giving her a comforting hug. "You have a good night, and I'll see you in the morning." "I love talking to you," Amy exclaimed, hugging him tightly. "And I love you too. Good night, Uncle Louis." As the copper-haired girl left the clearing and walked along the dark path that led home, she could hear her friends calling out for their cats in the meadow below. Happy that little birds and rabbits were now safe from the killer cats, and comforted by the wonderful talk she'd just had, Amy smiled. "I will be a kind person to everyone," she decided. "I'll try to reach out to others, even if there's a chance my feelings might get hurt." Zahir and Georgia were sitting close together on the pink and white sofa, chatting happily when Amy came in. Zahir's arm was around George's shoulders, and Fredo had his paw on his master's lap. "Hi there," she said cheerily, smiling at everyone. "Is everything okay?" Zahir asked, stroking his dog's head. "Yes," Amy replied merrily as she headed to the stairs. "I just had a wonderful chat with Uncle Louis. I'm very happy." "A great chat after another long day feeding everyone," Zahir smiled. Amy glanced over with a puzzled expression. "You feed the people during the day and the animals at night," he remarked kindly. "You help make paradise a better place." Zahir's gentle acknowledgement brought a smile to her face. But before she could respond with gratitude, Georgia piped up. "Zahir is thanking everyone for what they do," she laughed. "It's his day of encouragement. He wants to be just like Uncle Louis." Glancing from one to the other, Amy saw Zahir give Georgia a look of frustration. For a moment, she was confused as to whether the compliment had been a sincere observation or a dutiful remark. Laughing, Georgia ruffled Zahir's hair and teased, "Little Louie, little Louie." "Call me that all you want," Zahir responded cheerfully, holding Georgia's arms to her side so she couldn't reach his hair. "It's the highest compliment." Jealousy reignited as her two friends playfully wrestled on the couch. Amy didn't know that Zahir wanted to be just like Uncle Louis, and she resented the fact that Georgia knew more about him than she did. Fleeing to her room, it took Amy a while to calm down. Lying in her bed in the darkness, she watched the moon come up past the hazy sky and become brilliantly clear. Over and over she replayed her conversation with Uncle Louis and tried to remember his advice. Gradually, she sorted it through. From now on, she told herself before drifting off to sleep, I'm going to put the past aside and be friendly and kind to everyone. I want to bring happiness to others and stop all my tears. She pondered various ways that she could do this and decided that Zahir's goal was a lofty one. It resonated in her heart. She also wanted to be more like Uncle Louis. Encouraging others is a good place to start, she thought. I'm going to try and do that tomorrow. Chapter 30. The Invitation. What do you think? Jack Slemans asked Evan, showing him a digital flyer on his phone. I haven't sent it out yet. I'm just looking for input. Making it wider on the screen, Evan looked it over carefully. I'm glad you chose the picture of the first celebration. The tinies all look so happy. Amy and Zahir showcase well, the professor agreed, and most of the others are also in that photo. Evan read the words, Paradise Research Exhibit, Greenville University Biosphere, Ontario, Canada. Open April 7th to 10th, featuring the tinies, miniature humans and animals living in a beautiful world with minimal suffering. All scientists are welcome to study human behavior in ideal circumstances. Registration required. Paradise Research at profs.ca. This looks good, Evan assured him, mentally calculating that they had 22 days left before April 7th. He questioned, You were only allowing 4 days for the scientists, just Tuesday to Friday. I thought we were going to give them the whole month. Things are not going quite as well as I had hoped, the professor admitted. I have exams to manage on the Monday and, 4 days seems long enough. I want it to be a positive experience for everyone. But what about researching human behavior? Didn't you intend for them to see everything, the good and the bad? I'm worried. The professor paused. Evan could see his mentor was stressed. About the ethics committee? I had hoped we'd have some valuable insights to share at this point, he admitted heavily, which would help justify the sustainability of this project and bring others on board. Let's just commit to 4 days. And what about the public? We'll see how it goes. Are you concerned about Odin? The professor sighed. As you warned me a few months ago, they are all going through their teen years. Rebellion and fluctuating emotions are only par for the course. We know how happy the tinies have been in the past and are for the most part, but should certain individuals hear certain complaints or see sadness and misbehavior, I just think it'd be too easy for someone to blow a small incident way out of proportion. Evan nodded. He understood the professor's reasoning and realized that during the last 17 months they had both come to care for the tinies more than they had ever thought possible. Keeping the little family safe and happy had become a higher priority than creating headlines all around the world. Are you sure you don't want to wait till they're in their 25th month? I can't, the professor replied, shaking his head. The dean has been asking what we are up to. Rumors are spreading. I invited him to come tomorrow. What? Evan exclaimed. Fred Hoffman is coming here, into the viewing room? Yes, I know. I'm sorry I'm only telling you now, Jax apologized. He emailed last night and demanded to see what was going on. He's heard about our purchases. And ages ago, I promised Rachel that she would be the first to view everything. We don't have any longer, Evan, and I do feel the time is right, but 4 days will be long enough. Are you sending the invite out today? Evan clarified. None, he hesitated. Only to Rachel. We'll allow Fred in tomorrow and ensure we have his approval. If that goes okay, then I plan to email this invite to the rest of my colleagues and let the word spread from there. So, Rachel today and the dean tomorrow, Evan considered nervously. He watched as Jack sent the digital flyer to Dr. Khalid. There was a big smile on the professor's face. Evan walked over to the terrarium to have a look. The professor followed. Inside, next to the schoolhouse, Uncle Louis was still teaching the tinies their morning session. On the stand beside him, he had displayed a book about solar energy and various ways to harness its power. As Evan glanced in to examine the picture Louis was pointing to, he dimly noted that Odin was munching on some round objects that were piled in his lap. Up close to the glass, Evan whispered, "Is that the new book on solar energy?" "Yes, the one I ordered online," the professor told him quietly with a smile. "It will look good for the tinies to be working on investigative science projects when we open the display." "Yes, of course," Evan agreed. "Everyone will be pleased to see you are encouraging the use of natural energy." Glancing in more carefully at the tinies, Evan observed, "Say, have you noticed that some of them are gaining a lot of weight?" "Yes, I have," the professor nodded, keeping his voice low. "Odin looks bigger, and so do a few others, even Louis. I wonder what is going on." "I'm not quite sure," Evan remarked. "Are they eating something unusual?" He looked closely at the round things on Odin's lap. "I'd better check with Louis," the professor mused. Evan spoke up. "It almost looks like Odin has a pile of donuts." With a laugh, he shook his head, puzzled. "Perhaps Louis needs to implement an exercise program." "I will ask Louis if they're eating something unhealthy," the professor promised. As the lesson concluded, the two scientists watched the tinies gather free materials for science class from the school deck. Franz picked up a stretchy piece of elastic and showed it to Kenzie and Amy. "You should see the pebble launcher I made from this. Wow, this stretchiness really adds power." "You made a pebble launcher?" Kenzie asked wearily. "Lima and I visit Odin and Ponzi a lot," he told them. "The target practice area is really fun." "What do you fire the pebbles at?" Amy asked him with alarm, remembering the disastrous pebble impact that caused the flood. "Just old vegetables from the compost pile," Franz shrugged. He yawned and stretched as though he had just woken up. "We set them up on stumps and fire. Lima can hit any target from 100 steps away." "You're not aiming them up high," Amy frowned. "No way, whoosh girl," Franz assured her. "No one wants to start another flood. This is just for fun." The professor and Evan looked at one another in concern. Without a word, they walked to the North Forest to examine the area closely. Sure enough, a large target practice area had been set up. Some trees had been cut down, and large piles of dirt were spread out all around those that remained. "I don't like trees being cut down," the professor murmured. "That must have happened in the last few days. And where has all that dirt come from? What are they digging up?" "I suppose this is a good place for the young men to unleash some energy," Evan acknowledged with a smile. "It does look fun." "Why are they digging in the ground?" the professor pondered. "Maybe they're creating an underground den." "That would explain why they look dirty most of the time." He noticed a new instrument near the catapult. "That must be the pebble launcher," he remarked, looking more carefully. "It's amazing. How did they come up with that design?" "If you ever want to join us," the researchers heard Franz offer, "you just need to bring Odin something he can trade at the store for meals. We generally bring him rock, since Mining Hill is so close by. One day maybe we'll find the treasure." "Odin doesn't dig for his own rocks?" they heard Amy ask. "No way. He gets them delivered to his cabin. Then he just has to carry them over to the store." "Smart guy," Kenzie chuckled. Standing on the other side of Paradise, Evan smiled at the professor. "Odin's learning to work the system," he chuckled softly. The professor didn't smile. He was still looking in astonishment at the pebble launcher. "Ooh la la, that is well engineered," he said. "Did Franz say that he made it?" "He did," Evan said. "If so, that young man has a keen mind." "Yes," the professor said slowly. "I had no idea he was so smart. This is encouraging." "It's a wonder no one has found the treasure," Evan remarked. "There's been a lot of mining on that hill. I didn't think we buried it so deeply." "It'll be found soon," the professor agreed. "Hopefully it will bring joy to them all." Walking around a stand in front of the lake, the scientists viewed the students working on the solar project. Evan noted the group placements. He was pleased to see that very few of the tinies were with their usual friends. "Good job, Louis," the tall blonde-haired researcher said. "You're encouraging new relationships." Jax frowned, but Evan didn't say anything more. He felt that Louis knew what was best. Franz was working with Dia and Charlie. They were building a complicated solar oven design with an angled box and movable side reflectors. Evan saw Franz yawn twice as he directed the project. He's tired, he noted. They watched Kenzie, who was down on his knees measuring cardboard to make a box oven. Amy stood beside him, holding a pencil that was as tall as she was. They had a good system going. Kenzie would hold a building board perfectly level from one measurement to another, and Amy just had to run the pencil along the board to make a straight line. Since the Tinies were working near the school, the microphone under the veranda was picking up their voices very clearly. "We make a good team," Amy encouraged. "I like the way you're doing this so precisely." Kenzie looked up with a smile. "Thank you," he said. Tina and Vahid worked quietly next to them, cutting many complex pieces for their curved parabolic design using the sharp knife. Watching Tina and Vahid carefully pull the sharp blade through their rounded pencil lines, Amy said to them, "Your pattern is sure a lot harder than ours. Those are challenging pieces to cut." Vahid and Tina looked up and nodded, thankful she had noticed. The scientists looked at each other. "Amy has a voice of encouragement today," the professor smiled. "If the dean were here, I'm sure he'd be very impressed." There was a sudden holler of frustration. "You whoosh!" Odin called out. Nancy was embarrassed. Damon looked over irritably. Outside the dome, the two scientists exchanged puzzled frowns. "A whoosh?" the professor repeated quietly. "That's not how you position it!" Odin argued. "Yes, it is," Nancy contended. "Look at the instructions." For a few moments they debated the right way to do it, and finally Odin reluctantly quit arguing. Nancy was right. "What exactly is a whoosh?" Evan queried. "I'm not sure," the professor replied, noticing an important call was coming in on his phone. "Perhaps they've started making up their own derogatory terms."